The October wind sliced through the night like a knife, curling under hems, catching its sleeves, rattling dying leaves across the empty sidewalk. Emma Miller pulled her thin cotton dress tight around her tiny frame, but it did little good. The cold bit at her knees, her bare arms, her cheeks flushed red from exposure. She stood just outside the towering iron gates of the Harrington estate, their intricate curls and spikes as menacing as the stories whispered in the neighborhood. But tonight, they stood open, wide, inviting, or perhaps daring. Her small fingers trembled as she gripped the fraying ear of Mr. Whiskers, her only toy, her only friend besides Mommy. The stuffed rabbit was missing one eye and his seams were loosening around the edges. But to Emma, he was brave. He'd been there when the power was shut off, when Mommy coughed until she cried, when the cupboards emptied and never refilled. Emma's stomach growled loud in the quiet dusk. She ignored it. Be brave, Mr. Whiskers, she whispered, her breath rising in puffs. We're not doing this for us. We're doing it for Mommy. The lights inside the Harrington mansion blazed like golden fire through the giant windows. Laughter and music drifted out into the dying light, violins, clinking glasses, voices that had never known hunger. From across the street, she'd watched servers carry silver trays piled with food into the grand house. Fancy food. Food with steam and color. Her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had once said rich people threw out more food in a night than Emma and her mother ate in a week. Her decision was made. She crossed the threshold of the gate. The driveway curved like a serpent, flanked by hedges trimmed so perfect they looked fake. Emma stayed close to them, stepping on the grass instead of the gravel to muffle her sound. She moved slowly, her breath quick with nerves, but her steps steady. Her hands were numb. The air smelled like roasted meat and butter and something sweet she couldn't name. The house loomed ahead, 3 stories of glowing windows and stone columns. A palace. She found the side path leading around the back, just as she'd seen the gardeners take earlier that day. At the service door, a heavy wooden thing with a brass handle, she hesitated. She could hear footsteps inside, dishes clattering, voices rising and falling. She swallowed and knocked. It was a tiny sound, barely louder than her rabbit's heartbeat if he'd had one. She waited. Nothing. She knocked again, a little harder, still nothing. On the 3rd try, just as she raised her fist again, the door creaked open. A tall man in a black suit stared down at her, his eyes widened in surprise. He looked like someone important, not a server. His jacket had smooth lapels and a little gold pin shaped like a lion. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir," Emma said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "But I was wondering if there were any food scraps left. Just for my Mommy. She's sick." The man blinked. For a moment, she thought he might yell. Instead, he disappeared without a word, leaving the door open just a crack. Emma clutched Mr. Whiskers tighter. Her legs ached. Her feet burned from cold. She shifted from side to side, trying not to cry. Maybe he was telling someone to make her leave. Maybe footsteps returned. But when the door opened again, it wasn't the same man. A woman in a starched uniform stood there instead. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "Come with me, child," she said. "Mr. Harrington wants to see you." Emma's heart thudded. She stared up at the woman, unsure if she'd heard right. Mr. Harrington, yes, the owner, the man in the newspapers, the one Mommy once called the richest man in the city, and the loneliest. People said he hadn't left his mansion in 3 years. People said he was cruel, broken, that he hated visitors. So why did he want to see her? Emma hesitated, then stepped forward, one hand clutching Mr. Whiskers, one foot in the warmth of the doorway. One question echoing louder than the wind. What could a billionaire who couldn't walk possibly want with a girl like her? Asterisk. The woman's heels clicked crisply on the marble floors as she led Emma through a hallway so bright and clean it made her blink. Everything inside shimmered. The walls were pale gold. The lights came from glass chandeliers that looked like upside-down flowers. Even the silence felt heavy, like it didn't want to be disturbed. Emma walked quickly to keep up, her small feet making no sound on the gleaming tiles. Mr. Whiskers dragged slightly behind her, his patched paw brushing the floor. Her fingers clutched him tighter. Every step away from the kitchen made her more nervous. She hadn't come for anything more than scraps. She didn't want trouble. She only wanted Mommy to eat. They passed open rooms larger than her whole apartment. One room had a piano so big it looked like a boat. Another was filled with books, from floor to ceiling. In one room, A long table sat under a chandelier with more forks than Emma had ever seen in her life. "Is Mr. Harrington mad at me?" she asked softly, staring at the back of the woman's stiff uniform. The woman didn't slow her pace, but she turned her head slightly. "No, child. He's curious." That was somehow worse. At the end of the hall, the massive double doors waited. The woman paused, smoothed her apron, then gave a single knock before pushing them open. The room beyond was dark and warm. Fire crackled in a large stone fireplace. Shadows flickered across shelves and velvet curtains. A large, carved desk sat at the far end, and beside it, in front of the fire, was a man in a sleek black wheelchair. He was older than Emma expected, not ancient, but not young either. Gray hair combed neatly back, sharp jaw, deep lines across his face, like cracks in stone. His eyes were the coldest partized blue and piercing, eyes that didn't just look at her. They measured her. "So," the man said, voice deep and gravelly, "you're the little beggar knocking on my back door." Emma froze. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly, trying to curtsy like she'd seen in movies. "I didn't mean to be rude. I just wanted some food for my mommy." She held Mr. Whiskers close, eyes fixed on the floor. Her stomach hurt worse now, not from hunger, but fear. The man didn't reply at first. She heard the soft whir of his wheelchair as he rolled forward a bit, closer to the firelight, closer to her. "And where's your father?" he asked abruptly. Emma looked up, startled by the question. "He left when I was still in Mommy's tummy," she said simply. "She says he wasn't ready to be a daddy." Something flickered in the man's face, a shadow across his eyes. "And your name?" "Emma. Emma Miller." "Well, Emma Miller. Do you know who I am?" She nodded. "You're Mr. Harrington. You own this house, and a lot of other things." His lips twisted. It wasn't quite a smile. "Yes, I own a great many things. You know what I don't own." Emma shook her head. "Legs that work," he said flatly, tapping the armrest of his chair. "All my money, all my power, and I can't stand up to reach a glass on the top shelf." Emma's small hand moved to clutch Mr. Whiskers closer, unsure what to say. "I'm sorry, sir." He studied her for a long moment. The fire popped behind him. Then he laughed a hard, dry sound without joy. "You know what? Let's make a deal, little beggar. You want scraps? Fine. Here's the price." He leaned forward, his face lit orange by the flames. "Make me walk again, and the leftovers are yours." Emma blinked. Was this a test? A cruel joke? She didn't understand. "I'm not a doctor," she whispered. "I'm just—" "Then we have nothing else to discuss," he said, starting to turn his chair away. "Wait," she cried. Can I try?" His fingers paused on the wheel. He turned back slowly. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Richard Harrington was silent. Not from arrogance, but from surprise. "You actually think you can make me walk?" he said, voice low. "I don't know," Emma replied, "but my mommy says we should always try, even if it's impossible." The room went still. No music, no footsteps in the hall, just the soft hiss of fire. Finally, the man said, almost a whisper, "Fine. Come here then, miracle worker. Show me what the finest doctors in the world couldn't do." Emma walked forward, legs trembling. She stopped beside the great wheelchair and looked up into his weary, haunted face. "What's his name?" he asked, nodding at the rabbit. "Mr. Whiskers," she answered. "Well, Mr. Whiskers, watch carefully." He said, "Your girl's about to prove the impossible is real." And then Emma placed her tiny hand on the old man's leg, and everything changed. Asterisk. Richard Harrington opened his mouth, a cutting remark forming something cold, sarcastic, something that would remind this child of just how foolish her little act was. But he never got the words out, because the moment her tiny fingers touched his right knee, something shifted. It began as a tingling, faint and curious, like the way your leg feels when waking from sleep, a spark, then warmth, not the heat of the fire, but something internal, something buried. It crept slowly, radiating outward, spreading down his thigh, curling under his kneecap, brushing the nerves that, for 3 years, had been as dead as stone. His breath caught. Emma looked up at him, her face innocent but focused. "Do you feel that?" she asked softly. Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. His brain was too busy scrambling for logic, for reasons, for explanations. Phantom pain, delusion, psychosomatic response. But this wasn't pain. It was life. The Feeling moved further down his shin, across his ankle. When it touched the arch of his foot, his entire body stiffened. A sensation like pins and needles rushed through the sole, and then, impossibly, his right toe twitched, not by chance, not a spasm. It moved. He saw it, felt it. His toe moved. His hands gripped the armrest so tight the leather creaked beneath his fingers. His heart thundered in his chest, and for a moment, he wasn't the man with endless money, or the man with endless bitterness. He was just a man terrified by hope. Emma's hand stayed on his leg, steady, warm, real. "I do this for Mommy when she hurts," she said quietly. "She says it helps, makes her feel better." "Impossible," Richard whispered. "It's impossible." Gloria, the housekeeper, entered the room carrying a tray of hot cider. "Sir, your guests are asking. Tell them I'm indisposed," Richard snapped, not even looking at her. She paused, eyes flicking between the girl and her employer. "Yes, sir." She left silently. Richard leaned forward, eyes locked, on Emma like he was seeing her for the first time. "Do it again." She nodded, calm as a breeze. This time, she placed both hands on his knees. The warmth came faster, stronger. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like 1,000 slumbering nerves waking up all at once. He let out a shaky breath as the sensation moved deeper, richer, more complete. "Try to move your toes," she whispered again. Richard looked down, his foot stirred. Then again, the left one joined in this time. It lifted slightly, hovered, dropped. He stared, stunned. Movement. Actual movement. "My God," he said aloud, almost reverently. "Did it work?" Emma asked. Before he could answer, he slammed the button on his wheelchair's console. The security system beeped once. Moments later, Gloria returned. "Call Dr. Wilson," Richard ordered. "Tell him to come first thing tomorrow. No delays. I want a full evaluation. Neural scans, muscle diagnostics, blood work, everything." "Yes, sir." "And pack up the leftovers from dinner. All of it. Put it in a basket for this girl and her mother." Gloria blinked but nodded. "Of course." He turned back to Emma. His tone softened barely. "Where you live, child?" "West Side Apartments, Building C, Room 14. But it's not really a room anymore," she added quietly. "Just a place with a sink and a bed. The condemned building on Maple Street." Gloria asked. Stunned. Emma nodded. Richard's jaw clenched. "Tell Thomas to bring the car around. I'm taking her home. And get the kitchen to prepare a proper meal basket." "Sir?" Gloria asked. Shocked. "You're going out." "I said I'm taking her home," Richard repeated. "Do I need to repeat myself again?" "No, sir." When she was gone, he looked at Emma again, truly studied her. She didn't smile in triumph. She didn't ask for more. She just stood there, blinking at him, holding her stuffed rabbit like it was made of gold. "I'm going to meet your mother," Richard said quietly. "I want to see the woman who raised you." Emma's eyes lit up. "Really?" And he added, with the ghost of a smile, "You've earned more than just scraps tonight." As they wheeled toward the front entrance, Emma walking beside him, her head barely reaching his armrest, he felt something stir in his chest that hadn't moved in years. It wasn't his legs. It was his heart. The rain started just as the black sedan pulled up outside the crumbling facade of Building C, West Side Apartments. Water spilled from the rusted gutters in thick streams, pooling in cracked concrete beneath flickering street lamps. A loose sign banged softly against the side of the building. The words "No trespassing" nearly worn away. Richard Harrington looked out the tinted window and exhaled through his nose. This wasn't a place for anyone, let alone a child. Emma sat beside him in the car, quiet and calm. She had fallen asleep briefly during the ride, her head resting on Mr. Whiskers, now damp from the lingering mist clinging to her curls. She stirred as the engine stopped, rubbing her eyes as the headlights bathed the soaked building. "Is this home?" Richard asked. Emma nodded, eyes blinking fast. "Mommy Sue's by the window, so there's light." The door opened. Gloria stood outside holding a large basket covered in cloth. Steam still rose from within. Roast chicken, fresh rolls, mashed potatoes, something warm with cinnamon. Thomas, the driver, held an umbrella over Richard as he lowered himself from the car. He didn't need to be wheeled anymore. Not tonight. He used the wheelchair still, but now out of habit, not necessity. There was fire in his legs now, even if his steps were still unsteady inside the apartment. Sarah Miller tried to thread a needle for the third time. Her fingers shook, not from cold, but exhaustion. She coughed again, harsh, deep, cutting. Her lungs burned. The light overhead flickered once, then dimmed again. The bulb was half blackened, but she hadn't had the heart to replace it. And knocked out she flinched. No one knocked here. Who is it? She called, voice rough. Mommy, it's me, came Emma's muffled voice. I brought food. Sarah shot to her feet, the needle clattering to the floor. She pulled open the door, expecting what? A neighbor, a soup kitchen box. But what she saw made her go cold. A man in a black coat and wheelchair, a woman holding a basket, and her daughter, smiling like the sun had come back to the sky. Sarah grabbed Emma and pulled her inside. What is this? Who are you? This is Mr. Harrington, Emma said proudly, stepping aside. He brought us food, a lot of food. Sarah stared at the man in the chair, Richard Harrington. She'd seen him in newspapers on magazine covers, long before he vanished from public life. Now he was here, in her doorway, in the middle of a storm. Mrs. Miller, Richard said, his voice firm but not unkind. May we come in? Sarah stood frozen for a moment. Shame held her throat closed. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. Inside, the apartment was clean but hollow. One mattress on the floor, a milk crate with a hot plate, a laundry line across the ceiling, faded wallpaper clinging to plaster like peeling skin. I'm sorry for the mess, Sarah murmured. No apologies necessary, Richard replied. Gloria stepped inside and began unloading the basket. Real plates, heavy containers, spoons wrapped, and cloth napkins. The smell of hot food filled the room like music. Emma clapped her hands. Mommy, there's even cake. Sarah looked between the meal, her daughter, and the stranger in the chair. I don't understand. Why would you bring us food? Richard nodded toward Emma. Because your daughter came to my home tonight asking for leftovers. Not for herself. For you. Sarah's breath hitched. Emma, you didn't. She did. Richard interrupted. And she did something else, too. Something I still don't understand. Emma looked at her mother, uncertain. He told me if I made him walk, I could have the food. Sarah stared. What? I was joking, Richard said, cruelly. But when she touched me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Sarah's confusion turned to disbelief. You're saying my daughter healed you. I'm saying I don't know what happened. But yes, I felt warmth. I moved my toes. I walked. Nearly. Sarah turned pale, gripping the edge of the table. No, you're mistaken. Emma's just a little girl. She's not. She's something, Richard said softly. And I intend to find out what that is. With your permission. What do you want from us? Nothing, Richard replied, except to see if this gift is real, and if so, to make sure no one else exploits it. Sarah coughed deep and ragged. Emma looked at her with fear. In her eyes, Mommy's been hiding her cough. Emma whispered. She said the medicine's too expensive. Richard watched her carefully. That ends tonight. Sarah looked up, furious. We don't need your charity. It's not charity. He said, it's gratitude. If your daughter can help me, then I owe her the chance to help you too. Silence fell. Sarah looked away, ashamed. I can give you clean clothes, real beds, doctors, school for Emma. But only if you agree. Emma touched her mother's hand. Please, Mommy. He was nice to me. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to fight the pressure in her chest and in her heart. When she opened them again, tears clung to the corners. 1 week, she said softly. We'll try for 1 week. Richard nodded once. That we start tomorrow. He turned his chair, but before he left, he glanced back at Emma, who stood barefoot on the cold floor, cradling Mr. Whiskers like a prize for the first time in years. He smiled without bitterness. And for the first time in years, he meant it. The Harrington estate glowed softly under the pale morning sky, its windows lit with the golden hue of early sun. A thin mist curled along the hedges, wrapping the lawns in a hush of privacy and secrecy inside the guest house at the rear of the property. Sarah woke slowly to the scent of something unfamiliar. Fresh bread. She blinked. Not dust, not mold, not the faint whiff of burnt wires from the heater coil. Just bread. The soft bed beneath her felt like heaven, far too soft to be real. Her worn flannel pajamas provided the night before still held the faint lavender scent of someone else's laundry detergent. She sat up, startled at how warm and full her chest felt. It wasn't a cough this time, just air, clean and deep. Across the room, Emma sat at the breakfast table, swinging her legs as she devoured a buttered croissant with both hands. Gloria stood beside her, fussing gently with her hair. "She's awake," Emma cried, scrambling off her chair. She ran to the bed and threw her arms around her mother's waist. "Mommy, there's jam and apple juice in a glass that looks like a little cup castle." Sarah smiled weakly, smoothing her daughter's hair, but something heavy lingered behind her eyes. Gloria approached with a small tray. "Just tea and toast to start." "Dr. Wilson will see you after Mr. Harrington's session." "His session?" Sarah asked. "With Emma," Gloria said gently. "He's in the medical wing now. They want a testing." Sarah's fingers tensed. "You mean experimenting?" Gloria held her gaze, observing, carefully, with limits. "Sarah, you have my word." But Sarah didn't answer. Her heart was already racing in the estate's lower wing. Richard Harrington sat in a specialized chair surrounded by softly humming machines. Dr. Thomas Wilson reviewed real-time data on a sleek screen beside him, frowning thoughtfully. Emma stood to the side, her stuffed rabbit under one arm and a juice box in the other. "So you're saying it's electromagnetic?" Richard asked as Emma placed her hand gently on his left thigh. "Partially," Wilson murmured. "Watching the readings spike, there's a measurable field shift when she makes contact. Pulse patterns to rhythmic to be random, almost like a transfer." Richard felt it begin the warmth again, crawling along the dead nerve paths like morning light over frost. He flexed his toes. All 5 moved. "Jesus," he whispered. "She's doing it again." "Documenting," Wilson said, his voice quieter now, less clinical, more odd. Richard slowly placed both hands on the arms of the chair. "Help me," he said to Wilson. "Richard, now." The doctor rose, stepping to Richard's side. Together, they braced. Richard pressed upward. His knees buckled, his thighs shook, but the motion was real. He rose slow, staggering but upright. Emma clapped, juice forgotten. "You did it." Richard's breath came hard, but his eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been in years. "For seconds," Wilson said, "before collapse." "What is something?" "It's everything," Richard said. Back in the guest house, Sarah paced as Gloria helped her into clean clothes. "She's 6, Sarah snapped. "And she came to you for leftovers. Not this, not tests, not..." "Sarah," Gloria interrupted gently, "Emma is special. That's clear now. But you're not alone anymore. She's safe here. I swear to you." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Is she? Because she didn't sleep well last night. She had dark circles." She said her tummy hurt after helping him. Gloria paused. "I'll speak to Dr. Wilson. She's just a little girl," Sarah repeated, "not a miracle machine." By noon, the session was over. Richard, flushed with effort, had returned to the parlor, where a fire blazed and Coco waited. Emma sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, sleepy but smiling. Sarah entered the room, her gaze immediately landing on her daughter. "She's exhausted," she said sharply. "I'm fine, Mommy," Emma mumbled, though her voice trembled. Dr. Wilson stood in the corner, reviewing his tablet. "She's not in danger," he said carefully, "but I believe the healing draws energy directly from her. Glucose levels drop during contact. She needs rest. Calories, hydration, she needs a nap," Sarah said, kneeling to scoop her daughter into her arms. "Not more tests." "Agreed," Richard said. Sarah blinked. "What?" Richard's face was serious. "She's not a test subject. She's Emma, and if she needs to rest, we rest. There's no rush." He paused. "But Sarah, something's happening here. Something bigger than any of us. I won't push, but I won't ignore it either." Sarah held Emma closer, listening to her small breaths. "She wanted to help you," she said quietly, "because you were kind to her, not because she's anyone's savior." "I know," Richard said, "which is why I'll protect her, no matter what happens next." Sarah met his eyes finally, and in that moment, something shifted. Trust didn't arrive, but the door cracked open. "Good," she said, "because if you don't, I will burn this place to the ground." And Richard, billionaire, survivor, almost man, once more believed her completely. Asterisk thunder rolled in the distance as storm clouds thickened above the Harrington estate. The air felt charged, as if the world itself knew something was coming. But inside the guest house, it was calm. Emma napped peacefully beneath a thick quilt, Mr. Whiskers curled in her arms like a guardian knight. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea with both hands wrapped around the mug. She watched the rain begin to fall through the window, each drop tapping gently against the glass like a distant countdown. Across the estate, in his study, Richard stared out at the same storm, His cane rested against the chair beside him. He hadn't needed the wheelchair for 2 days now, though Dr. Wilson insisted he keep it close. His legs still trembled after long stretches of walking. But they worked. They worked. He pressed a button on his desk, and his assistant Bernard's voice came through the intercom. "Give me Michael. Tell him it's urgent." "Right away, sir." Richard drummed his fingers on the desk. He had felt this coming, the moment where change would ripple outward, where others would sense the impossible and come sniffing for a piece of it. Emma's gift wasn't something he could contain forever. 10 minutes later, Michael Harrington arrived at the estate, stepping out of his car with rain still glistening on his tailored coat. His expression was unreadable as he entered the study. "You said it was urgent." Richard didn't waste time. "Someone leaked Emma's ability to the press." Michael froze. "What?" "A reporter from the Boston Globe contacted Gloria's niece this morning. They asked about a child living on the estate. A girl connected to my sudden miraculous recovery." Michael's jaw tightened. "How did this happen?" "You tell me," Richard said coldly. "You were the one calling. Old contacts, stirring curiosity, floating the idea of going public. I never gave a name, never confirmed anything." "But you didn't shut it down either," Richard snapped. "Now there are whispers, and whispers become spotlights." Michael sighed, brushing a hand through his hair. "This was going to happen eventually, Father." "You walked again. It's not something people ignore." "This isn't about me anymore," Richard said. "This is about her, Emma. She's just a child." "You want to bury this forever?" Michael asked. "She could help thousands, maybe millions. That little girl has something the world needs." Richard's voice dropped low. "And what does she need, Michael? A life, a future not spent in laboratories, not spent as some government experiment. She's not a miracle cure. She's Emma." Silence. Thick and heavy dot, then Gloria burst in. Her face pale. "Sir, the front gate's news vans. 3 of them. They're here." Richard didn't hesitate. "Call Bernard. Tell him to prepare the island house. Get the boat ready. We're leaving." Michael stepped forward. "You're running. I'm protecting her." Sarah stood in the hallway of the guest house as the security team briefed her. Her arms folded tightly over her chest. "They're outside?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," said the lead guard. "Press. Maybe more." Emma, now awake, stood behind her mother, wide-eyed. "Are they here because of me?" Sarah knelt, brushing the hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, baby, but we're going somewhere safe. Just you and me. Remember what Mr. Harrington said about adventures?" Emma nodded slowly, "Like pirates." "Exactly," Richard said, arriving in the doorway behind them. "Only the treasure we're protecting is you." Within the hour, duffel bags were packed, guards positioned, and the estate's hidden exit road was open. Security led the cart convoy out the back while reporters crowded the closed front gates. Rain slicked the windshield as the vehicle headed toward Harrington's private dock. The sea waited, rough and dark, but it was freedom. The boat cut through the water like a blade. Emma stood at the deck's edge, staring into the spray. She wasn't smiling. "Mommy," she said softly. "Yes, love, Mr. Harrington's in trouble." Sarah turned. "What do you mean?" Emma clutched her bracelet, the one Richard had given her with a little rabbit charm. Her thumb rubbed over the tiny blue dot embedded inside. "He's calling for me." Inside the cabin, the emergency signal blinked. Richard had activated it. Sarah stared at the pulse. "No," she whispered. "Not now. We have to go back," Emma said. Sarah hesitated. The boat was halfway to the island, but her daughter's eyes were fierce. "He's hurting. I feel it." Sarah looked to Michael, who'd accompanied them at Richard's insistence. "What happened?" she asked. Michael didn't hesitate. "He collapsed after you left. A stroke." Emma stepped forward. "Then I have to help." Sarah grabbed her shoulders. "You don't understand how tired you'll be, how much it might hurt. He helped us when we had nothing," Emma whispered. "Now it's my turn." The rain picked up again. The boat turned around, back toward the storm, back toward the man who dared to hope, back toward the heart that had begun to heal. The hospital lights buzzed faintly overhead as the emergency wing throbbed with tension. Machines beeped steadily in Richard Harrington's private room, a converted VIP suite now guarded by armed men in dark suits. The walls, usually lined with muted art, were bare. Everything unnecessary had been removed. Only the cold, sterile scent of antiseptic remained. Sarah's heart pounded as she and Emma, both cloaked in oversized hooded jackets, slipped through the service entrance. Michael led the way, flashing clearance at every checkpoint. His voice was calm, controlled, but his eyes burned with guilt. He collapsed minutes after the media storm hit the estate. He murmured as they rode the freight elevator. Blood pressure spiked, massive stroke, left hemisphere. The doctors say it's a miracle he's even alive. Sarah squeezed Emma's hand. Are you sure he's still? She couldn't finish the question. Michael nodded once, barely, but he's holding on. The doors slid open. Dr. Wilson stood waiting, his face pale behind his mask. Sarah, Emma. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the little girl with a strange mixture of hope and concern. He's unconscious, stable, but unresponsive. Brain scans show swelling. Damage is significant, but we've kept him alive. Barely. Emma's grip on her rabbit tightened. I need to see him. Dr. Wilson nodded. Come, but don't touch anything until I say. They entered quietly. Richard lay in the bed, surrounded by machines. Tubes in his arms, oxygen at his nose, heart monitor blinking steadily. The strong, harsh man Emma remembered was gone. In his place was someone, smaller, paler, fragile. Sarah's breath caught. This was not the man who carried himself with steel and cold power. This was someone fading. Emma didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply walked forward. Can I? She asked Dr. Wilson, pointing to the side of the bed. He hesitated, then nodded, quickly. Emma climbed onto a step stool and placed both of her small hands on either side of Richard's head. She closed her eyes. Nothing happened at first. Just the beeping, the rain outside, the weight of fear in everyone's chest. Then, slowly, Richard's breathing shifted. The color in his cheeks deepened. Dr. Wilson's monitor spiked with activity, neural activity increasing. He whispered, eyes wide, Emma's face scrunched in concentration. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her knees trembled slightly. Emma, Sarah whispered. That's enough. Not yet, Emma murmured. Another spike. On the screen, a flicker of movement in Richard's left hand. Then, his fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered. A groan escaped his throat. Emma, Dr. Wilson said sharply, noticing the sudden drop in her blood sugar reading on the scanner clipped to her wrist. That's enough. But Emma kept going. Richard's eyelids opened slowly, disoriented, cloudy, then focused. He blinked. Emma. He rasped. She smiled and collapsed. Sarah caught her just before she hit the floor. Emma, she cried, cradling her daughter's limp body. Dr. Wilson moved fast. Blood sugar crash. Give me glucose now. Nurses rushed in. Within seconds, a syringe was pressed into Emma's thigh. She jerked slightly, groaned, and then still. She's stabilizing, Wilson said, pulse returning to normal. Richard tried to sit up, failing with a wince. Where is she? He asked, voice still hoarse. Michael stepped forward. She saved you, again. Richard's eyes found Sarah, found Emma, now resting in her mother's lap, pale but breathing. What have we done to her? He whispered. Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming silently. She wouldn't stop, not until she brought you back. Hours passed. By nightfall, Emma was awake again, resting in a separate recovery room. Sarah never left her side. She fed her soup by hand, whispering stories about butterflies and quiet magic. In the room next door, Richard sat up in bed. No machines, no paralysis. Just quiet. Michael stood by the window, arms crossed. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, I was wrong. Richard nodded. Yes, you were. Michael sighed. She's not just a healer, she's a child. Richard turned to face him fully. And that's all she'll be, until she chooses otherwise. Michael looked down. What happens now? We protect her. Not just from the world, from us too. Later, when Richard was cleared to leave the hospital, he walked naked into Emma's room. She looked up, smiling weakly. You're okay. He knelt beside her bed, slowly, gratefully. Because of you. She reached for his hand. He took it. I told you I could help, she whispered. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever hurts you. Outside the hospital, the world still raged. Press vans, medical corporations, government agencies forming strategies. But in room 114, there was only one thing that mattered. A man who could walk again, a girl who gave too much, and a promise that this time, the miracle would be protected. The first thing Emma noticed when she opened her eyes was sunlight, soft, warm, golden. It poured through the window in gentle waves, dancing across the ceiling like paint from an invisible brush. The second thing she noticed was her mother's hand wrapped around hers. "Mommy," Emma whispered, her voice still a little scratchy. Sarah leaned in, eyes glistening with relief. "I'm here, baby. You're safe." Emma smiled weakly and turned her head toward the open door, just in time to see Richard Herring in no wheelchair, no cane, standing tall, dressed in a simple navy sweater and slacks. The color had returned to his face, and the stiffness that had defined his posture for 3 long years was gone. "You're really walking," Emma said softly. "I am," he replied, his voice thick. "Because of you." Emma blinked slowly, her strength not fully returned. "You're welcome." Sarah sat upright as Richard entered the room and gently laid a folder on the small bedside table. "What's that?" she asked cautiously. "Her future," he said. Sarah hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside was a legal trust agreement, signed and notarized. Funds for Emma's education, medical care, a new home under her name, complete ownership by the time she turned 18. Included was a contract offering Sarah full autonomy in every decision related to her daughter's well-being, along with a formal clause preventing any form of study, experimentation, or public disclosure of Emma's ability without Sarah's written consent. Sarah read in silence. Her hands shook. "Why?" she finally asked. Richard pulled a chair to Emma's bedside and sat. "Because what I saw yesterday, what we all saw, was a miracle. But more than that, it was a gift given freely, from a little girl who asked for nothing in return but leftovers to feed her mother." He turned to Emma. "You gave me back my life, sweetheart. Now it's my job to make sure no one ever tries to take yours from you." Michael entered the room next. He looked different, less polished. No tie, no pretense. He nodded at Sarah and knelt down beside Emma's bed, lowering his voice. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I thought the world deserved your gift, but I didn't stop to think about you. That was wrong." Emma studied him for a long moment, then offered a tired smile. "It's okay. You were just scared. Grown-ups get scared too." Michael laughed quietly, surprised. "Yeah, we really do." By that evening, Emma was discharged into a new world. A new home awaited still on the Harrington estate grounds, but surrounded by trees, gardens, and stone pathways that led to a sunroom filled with books and paints. Her school enrollment papers had already been filed. A private tutor would help with the transition until she felt ready to join other children again. But the biggest change wasn't in the building or the documents. It was in the people. Richard no longer barked orders, he asked. Michael listened more than he spoke, and Sarah, though still cautious, laughed more easily. Even Gloria cried the first time Emma ran across the grass barefoot and twirled under the falling autumn leaves. 1 week later, Dr. Wilson ran a final scan on Richard's spine. "No sign of residual damage," he said in disbelief. "Neural regeneration beyond anything I've ever documented." Richard glanced at Emma, who stood by the window feeding birds. "And she's the reason." "Yes," Wilson said, then added carefully, "but she's still a child." "I know." That night, Richard sat beside Sarah on a bench near the rose garden. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "Emma's gift. What it really means." Sarah turned to him. "And it's not just that she heals," he said. "It's how she heals. Not just the body, but the heart. Mine was paralyzed long before my legs were." Sarah didn't speak, but her silence was full of agreement. A breeze swept through the trees. "She told me something yesterday," Richard continued. "She said, when I help someone, I feel warm inside. But if I help too much, the warmth goes away and I feel empty." Sarah's breath caught. "I've made arrangements," Richard said. "Sessions no more than once a month, with full medical monitoring, but only if she wants to." Not one finger lifted without her saying yes. Sarah nodded slowly. "Thank you. She needs to be protected, loved, free to grow." Sarah looked at him for a long time. "Then we raised her together." Richard blinked. "Together?" "She saved both our lives," Sarah said simply. "Mine through years of darkness, yours in one spark. She's already teaching us how to be better." Richard smiled. "She really is." From across the garden, Emma ran toward them with Mr. Whiskers in one hand and a crumpled drawing in the other. "I drew something," she called. They stood to meet her. On the page was a picture of all three of them, Emma, Sarah, and Richard, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them floated the words in wobbly, colorful letters. "You don't need to be broken to be healed." And beneath it, in a second line. You just need someone to try. As the sun dipped below the trees and painted the sky in fire and gold, the three of them stood there together, not as patient, healer, and guardian, but as something stronger, something real, a family made, not by blood, but by choice, by courage, and by kindness. And as Emma twirled, laughter echoing through the dusk, the world for a brief, beautiful moment forgot its hunger for miracles. And remembered the miracle of her.